Hello, I'm Scott Thompson, and welcome to After 10. 10 years ago this week, the Kaesong Industrial Complex opened its doors and today stands as the last remaining form of economic cooperation between the two Koreas. Today on the show, we take a look at the past, the present, and the future of the complex with Dr. Hyun Jung-taik, Vice Chairman of the National Economic Advisory Council. Dr. Hyun, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you for inviting me to the program.
Let's start back on June 30th, 2004, when 15 South Korean companies began operations at the Kaesong Industrial Complex. 10 years later, today, what do you see as being the biggest achievements of the complex?
The biggest implication is that through this complex, the North Koreans can learn the market economy. The North Korean workers are learning, I think, Korean company operation, and they are working with the Korean manager, they are working with the Korean supervisor. Of course, these North Korean authorities do not tell such a story. They call these North Korean workers as a soldier for earning hard currency or foreign currency. But you cannot deny the fact. It is a South Korean system operating company. I've been to Pyongyang, and I've been to Pyongyang factory, and that factory is completely different. There is no concept of profit or deficit there. When the raw material comes in, they just work. If the supply of raw material stopped, they just stopped work. There is no incentive, no market there. So Kaesong is the only place where the North Koreans can learn the market economy.
I guess the question to that would be, though, are they actually learning the market economy? We're talking about a very small number, right, of North Koreans that are working there. Do we see any sign that is perhaps leaking out to the rest of the population?
The original plan is the development site itself is about 60 million square meters. But actually up to now, about only 3 million square meters is developed as 120s. In terms of the number of employees, the original plan at the final stage is about 350,000 people is working. Now is only 50,000. So as you said, I think that the number of the overall impact is not as much as we expected. But at least these 50,000 workers and their families, I think it's about 200,000 altogether. At least they know the system. They know South Korean. So.
You mentioned that the expectations haven't really been met on certain scales. Yes. What expectations have been met about the complex over that time?
In terms of, I think that our company operation itself and the side facilities, there is a hospital, South Korean operated hospital is working, and then a supply and energy supply. All these, how can I say, logistics as preparation is working. But I will talk about the details later. But about the basic condition, for example, we call this 3 flows. So free flow of personnel, free flow of that materials and goods, custom clearance, and then utilization of this mobile or telephone communication. That even after 10 years is not, I think, quite free as well. So it works as a hindrance to the total operation.
There have, of course, been setbacks overall, though, over the past 10 years. Would you say this has been a successful
as far as this actual achievement is concerned, you cannot say this is a success or a complete success. But it is really a good step, and then it is a quite good project for the pilot and then symbolic.
Let's take a look at what each of the Koreas have gained from participating in this project, starting with South Korea.
There are two aspects about the companies. Where for the companies, or as I already told, the profit is, I think, the highest priority. In that sense, those companies who are operating their facility there, they make a profit, they can maintain the business. Without the Kaesong, they have to find their factories, even in Vietnam or Dominica, whatever. But at Kaesong, you can find the relatively cheap workers with a relatively good productivity, so they can make a production or operation and export. Again, for the South Korean government is clearly there is a reducing of this security tension. It gives foreign investor the tensions in Korean Peninsula is reduced. Even to the North Korean regime, I think there is biggest gain is that at least they show some credential to the international. I think there's observers. So they are trying to have some inter-Korean relation. They are trying to do something. So that signal the North Korean is giving to international community is important.
Now, when we're talking about the average North Korean worker at Kaesong, what sorts of benefits are they getting specifically from the South Korean companies that they're working for?
The wage in Kaesong, as monthly wage, is $63 a month, and it is below 1/10 of South Korean workers in Sihwa complex. But when you see this productivity, these North Korean workers, productivity is higher than Vietnamese, even close to Chinese workers. Korean companies who invest in Kaesong Industrial Complex, they can enjoy the higher productivity and good product quality. From the viewpoint of North Korean workers, at the beginning of their job, their productivity is much like other socialist countries. So there is no incentives. But after 1 year or 2 years of experience in Korean companies there, then their productivity is increased. That means they know the skill, they learn the market, they learn the incentive. So they are learning the ability how to make money, how to win the life.
And to what degree has the Kaesong complex contributed to strengthening inter-Korean ties? For instance, if we had no Kaesong complex, where do you think relations might be today?
Let me give the numbers. Before the Kaesong Industrial Complex, inter-Korean trade, the number is about millions. So $20 million or $50 million altogether North-South trade. Now, in terms of year 2012's number, there are $2 billion into Korean trade. It is 100 times. So it clearly is a first step that North and South really, I think, steps into the substantial economic relations. Of course, without South Korea, North Korea can have the relation with other countries, but the only source, the main source is China. So to the North Korean side, other than China, the South Korea is the second biggest trading partner.
Looking at the current situation at the complex, North unilaterally suspended operations there last year for about 5 months. Really put the complex in danger of going bankrupt, perhaps even going under at that time. What lessons can be learned, should be learned, have been learned from that situation?
It is very symbolic, both for South Korea and North Korea. Both would have been very much damaged if that complex was fully really stopped. So to the north, whatever they are saying, if the Kaesong Industrial Complex was shut down, then to the outsiders of international community, even though they are not quite predictable, but the closing down the Kaesong Industrial Complex is completely, I think that, they were disregarded completely. So in that sense, the lessons to North Korea is that they have to continue in order to survive in the world. To the South Korea, we also acknowledge it. So it is really a symbolic project, and we have to continue. If this project was stopped, then it gives international investor to the foreign investors. Then Korean Peninsula may not be so safe. What should be done? This inter-Korean relation is so much affected by political factors. So one lesson is at least this economic project should be separated from these political reasons. Another is this South and North just bilateral war engagement, as sometimes were risky and volatile. So in order to escape such a problem, to make it a common or a third tripartite or multilateral relation should be a good step. So in that sense, South Korea proposed to make it an international war complex, and then they have agreed. So we are moving in the right direction.
Tell us a little bit about what it means, this attempt to globalize the complex.
I think that the important meaning is that it becomes more close to the global standard. I don't expect that North Korea will at once adopt all the global standard, but at least in addition to North Korea, South Korean bilateral agreement, if international player is involved, they have to look at the international standard of paying, how to pay the wage, how to make a contract, how to supply the raw material, what is the custom clearance. So communication I already mentioned. So at least they have to change. They have to make a concern and interest about what is the international practice. So it is a step toward the international practice, and at the same time, at least it can show that in international project, being an international project means rejecting it means clearly totally out of the international player. So being an international project means there is reducing the chance of sudden or interruption or sudden drop-off of this project. That is another implication. And of course, being an international project means there is more opportunity for the market, more opportunity for the supply of technology.
I suppose, how realistic is this goal? I think 5 rounds of talks between the North and South have been held recently to make sure that another shutdown doesn't occur. They really haven't gotten anywhere. So when we're talking about globalizing the complex, which is a pretty tall task, is it a realistic goal at this point?
Well, again, going back to this 10 years ago, we are talking about, or it was a puzzle to the outsider. How come these North Koreans accept such a risky project? How come this North Korean army, I think that policymakers, you know that in North Korea is that there is so-called 선군주의, so priority must be given to the military, and then the Kaesong is one of the most focused strategic military point there. But they finally agreed to set up such a facility. In that sense, South Korean leaders and Chinese leaders and other international leaders are pushing up to North Korea. So you're right. We have discussed met 6 times during the last 1 year. But there is, although this official announcement is not made yet, but at least we have the slow and steady progress is there. So the inside this changing of the regulation is the talk is going on. And also from the outside, some European investor is showing interest in Kaesong Complex. Yeah.
And tell us a little bit about that. Tell us about who's interested in investing in Kaesong, what industries are looking at it, what companies.
The Europeans, particularly those who have worked with South Korean companies, they were interested in setting up a joint venture company, at least a joint venture with South Korean companies in Kaesong Complex. I know the one company is in Germany. They show an interest in setting up a textile and apparel companies in Kaesong. So the talk is going on, and industry there is mostly a labor-intensive industry.
Is this a situation where the North is satisfied with the status quo at the Kaesong Complex and they just really don't want to change? Or what is the challenge keeping us from getting to where people would like to see the complex be?
10 years ago, when they accepted this proposal, at that time, the North Korean leader himself and the bureaucrats or the economic experts, their voice were higher than the other parts of the North Korean regime. So at that time, they accepted it. But after that, there is a struggle between the different parts of the North Korean. So as you said, at some point, the North Korean armies might think this is too much, so we have to constrain this freedom. So at some point, they want to expand. But as I said, as the international, I think the leaders, international environment is changing and pushing, they have to make a change. And another good or bright side is the North Korea itself. They made a plan for the economic development even outside this Kaesong Industrial Complex. They have announced 7 different economic development projects. They are pushing with China or South Korea and Russia in developing Najin, Sambong, Nasan area. So at least in the direction, the announced direction of North Korean government, they are moving toward.
Why are we doing this? You're giving money, hard currency, to the North Korean regime, which is taking that money and using it to develop nuclear weapons and missiles and things of that sort. Is that a fair argument to make?
Every relation with North Korea has 2 aspects. One aspect is strengthening the North Korean regime, whatever, as a direct giving money or even visiting to Pyongyang. The North Korean regime is making a propaganda. Oh, this person. For example, when I visited Pyongyang, they say, oh, the South Korean Hyun Jung-taik, well, he's so and so an important person, but he's paying a visit to Pyongyang. So that kind of broadcasting has a side effect of strengthening current authoritarian North Korean regime. But there is another effect, completely opposite side effect. Whatever kind of relation in North Korea, that makes North Korean people exposed to the outside. So then even the TV programs, even the sports exchange, the North Koreans are learning from South Korean experience. So there are pros and cons in every kind of relation with North Korea. Among all these projects, I think the Kaesong is best. I mean, in making their change. For example, compare Kaesong Industrial Complex and Kumgangsan and Arirang. You know about the Arirang, right? They have a show and then outsiders are going to Pyongyang and then paying money. So compare the Arirang versus Kaesong or Kumgangsan versus Kaesong. Kaesong, as I said, 50,000 workers are exposed to South Koreans. They are changing, their family is changing. Arirang, there is a little change at all. In that sense, I think if it is not the case, we completely shut down all the relation. We have to make a relation. The higher priority should be given to the project.
What direction, realistically, do you see the complex going, and perhaps what direction would you like to see it go?
Many people is saying that in Kaesong, the total number is very small. So maybe that 200,000 people is already, all of the population is Kaesong City. That may be right. If it is the case, why not just Kaesong? So Haeju or Pyongyang, whatever. So in my expectation, if such a project like Kaesong is expanded 10 times, that means currently 200,000 people are exposed to the market economy. If Kaesong is expanded 10 times, or if we can make 10 projects, including Kaesong, then totally 2 million North Korean people will be exposed to market system. In that case, then they have to be changed. You cannot deceive 2 million people. So first of all, is such an exchange of the people, exchange of the project should be made. How we can do that? Well, it is clearly, I think, North Korean reaction is a very important issue. But again, the international cooperation. Our cooperation with China, or our cooperation with United States and Europe is very important. If they are interested in, and if they want to make an investment, then I think that the atmosphere have to be changed. Korea is now I think talking about the FTA with China, FTA with TPP, and also some investment banking system with China. So if these international talks arrangement is expanded, from the viewpoint of international investor, they don't see just our peninsula is South Korea and North Korea. They see the opportunity of Northeast Asian economic region. So we can explore the potential. Mm-hmm.
10 years in with the Kaesong Industrial Complex, it's certainly been an interesting 10 years. We'll be looking forward to the next 10 years to see what it holds. Dr. Hyun, thank you very much for being on the program and providing your insights. We appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me again.
And thank you, as always, for watching. We'll see you next time, After 10.
We will continue to do our best to improve our show based on the perspective of our viewers. Always feel free to leave us any comments, great ideas, or suggestions you wish to share with us.